If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
This is another of our popular Listener's Choice interviews, which we're playing over the weekend. We've chosen the most popular interviews for you to select the Listener's Choice winner. If you're not sure how the Listener's Choice competition works, have a look at horsechats.com/choice for the rules and the leaderboard. We've got an outstanding guest for you today, especially if you're a show jumping fan. Our guest today is Chris Chugg, also known as Chuggy. Chuggy is a show jumping specialist, competitor, trainer and coach. He's been an Australian show jumping champion 5 times, and he's also ridden at World Cup finals 5 times, resulting in great results, which is 7th and 10th. Chuggy's competed in the final in the World Equestrian Games in 2010 and currently out there competing and doing great things. How are you today, Chuggy?
Very well, thank you.
Great. Now, have you got a quote that you'd like to share with us today?
Well, the most important thing I've learned from the years, if you make it easy for your horse to learn, it makes it easy for you. That's the most important part, is find out what makes your horse tick, find out what makes his job easier. If you have a horse that needs encouragement, well, I do a lot of work at the walk and the trot to jumps, and that teaches the horses to be very comfortable with a deep distance and read the fence, and it's more about working around the fences more so than working over big jumps.
Okay. I think that's something to think about, not just for riders, but for coaches as well. So that's good. Now, I know that you started off pretty young as a rider. You know, you did a lot with Bev. And, yeah, can you tell us about your earliest memories?
Yeah, a lot of early memories sort of riding at 12 and 13 and 14. And basically we were always just trying to ride what we could afford to buy. So we did a lot of buying out of the Homebush sales down at Homebush. And we used to buy down there on Fridays and have a bit of a standard ad on Saturdays and Sundays in the Herald and the Telegraph to try to buy and sell horses. So I've been in the game of buying and selling horses for a long time with my mother, who was also first lady trainer to train a horse to win at Harold Park. So we had trotters at first. So keeping horses sound and working with different breeds and different bloods and different types of horses in the mind is very easy for me. So I used to have Arabs, show Arabs and ride Arabs, and that was my first job when I left school. I worked for Arabian Park and I showed stallions, and so I got to lead stallions and breed with stallions and do all the serving as well. So that's basically my background. I work with, mares and big geldings and stallions. So at the moment we have a current team of about 15 to 20 horses, and we're breeding 9 embryo foals a year, Gabby, my partner, and I. And we've got 7 drops so far, and we've got another 2 coming, and we've got 5 from last year. So the future for young horses are looking good. And we currently run about a team of 6 to 7 horses that are jumping between the horses, and very successful horses. Gabby and I went to Europe, purchased quite a few 4 and 5-year-olds. We like to start with young horses, so we know the history of them and bring them through the ranks like Gabby did with Crystalline. And unfortunately we have to sell to turnover because our main business is jumping horses, buying and selling, not so much coaching and teaching, which takes a lot of time away from being a competitive rider as Gabby is and I am. So we run a full-time stud together, and we've just been taking 5 mares and foals to different properties and making sure that the young foals that are born have got shade. So we're flat out from riding horses in the morning to basically managing the stud in the afternoon. So it's full time.
Yeah. It's a long jump from leaving school, working for someone, to doing what you're doing now, which a lot of people would look at it and go, wow, Chris has got everything. He's doing this all the time. He's just got everything. But it's been a lot of hard work, I'm sure. For someone who's just starting in the horse career, what sort of traits, personality traits, character traits do you think they need to have?
Well, it's a long-term project. I mean, you never stop learning with horses. I was a blacksmith for 6 years as well. When I stopped showing Arabs, I did my apprenticeship for a little while and stopped after the first year, and was just shoeing show jumping horses. And It's very important to be able to have something that supports this industry because the industry doesn't really pay a lot. There's not a lot of prize money involved. We basically live off selling horses internationally overseas, so there's 3 or 4 years in between, your meal ticket and paying your bills and covering your debt. So most people I teach and I speak to, young students or riders, I tell them to finish school, get a good job, because you won't always have the best sponsors in the world, which are your parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
By the time you turn 18, most parents are trying to feed the other kids or trying to chase you out of the house and make you get your own life. So, it's very important in this day and age to have a great job because the sport's very expensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what about people that you employ? Is it just you and Gabby? You have other people that work for you?
Yeah, we have full-time staff. We try to have 2, but sometimes we have 1. We're very lucky at the moment. We have Swanee. Swanee's a 21-year-old German girl from Germany, and she's been out doing other jobs in Melbourne with restaurants and working in that industry. And they come and go a bit. Mm-hmm. We don't keep the team so big that Gabby and I can't, if something happens, because they are casual workers. So it's very hard to find somebody who wants to put in a year or 2 years in this sport because it's a hard industry. There's a lot of hours. So quite often it's just Gabby and I. I think when we went to the World Cup final with Crystalline last year and Cassiago, we actually ran the whole place and the team ourselves. Okay. And it's a luxury to have someone working for you that's good and takes the same interest as you do. So there's certainly a lot of jobs out there for working in the show jumping game or the equestrian game, but it's unfortunately it's not a high-paying game. It's a lot of hours, but you've got to love the horses. And I do most of the riding myself. I ride up to 9 to 10, 11 horses a day and try to do the feeding of the young horses. But when we have staff, it just makes the day go a hell of a lot easier.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, for sure. Now, what about people who've influenced you?
Well, I'm very lucky. I have a lot of older people that ride that I look up to. And in 87, I was in Chugg stable in Germany, so I got to learn the German system, and I've had some really good trainers throughout the world. But my number one mentor would be George Morris. I've been training with George. He's the ex-American coach, and George has been coming to Australia for now 30 years, so I've been training with him since I was 21, and I'm lucky enough that Vicky Roycroft brings him out every year. He's due out again in Christmas time, so we have another clinic booked with him, and he basically gives me a sharpen up and works on my position and my weak points, and he's basically taught me my trade. So I'm very fortunate to have him, and every time I get to a World Cup final or a World Championships or at a big competition and he's there, it sort of makes you ride your best, and also it gives you someone to go back and get a little bit of feedback on the course because I don't have a trainer at all. So Gabby and I train each other.
Okay.
So it works well.
Yeah. Just having those eyes on the ground every day would be good, wouldn't it?
It is good.
Yeah. Okay, now I know you've had a lot of great horses, but who do you think's the standout?
Oh, it's hard to say. I think Vivant was a standout and Crystalline was a standout. One was a stallion and one was a mare. One was 7-year-old and one was 10-year-old at the World Cup final, and Vivant got 7th in the World Cup final, which is my highest ranking. I think it's also the highest ranking in Australia an Australian has ever had. And then I waited 2 years to produce Crystalline with Gabby, and Gabby produced Crystalline, and we went back and finished 10th. So it's a hard one to say, and I've had some great horses called WS Scandal, who was sold to Princess Haya from Jordan, and Mr. Currency was my first thoroughbred off the track, and I sold him to the Spanish team for Barcelona. So it's a hard one. He finished 19th in the world at the World Cup final, and since then I've been 19th, 7th and 10th. So
okay.
I don't really have a favourite. I run from thoroughbreds now into warm bloods, but I was probably closest to Vivant than most horses because I had him a little bit longer, and I bought him as a 3-year-old and ran him through until he was 10 and 11. So that was a long partnership, a lot of hours put into him, and he gave me his best. So I probably have the fondest memories of him. Okay. He's managed to retire in Ireland now as a 21-year-old, so he's having a good life.
Good. What about your proudest moment?
I've had a few. I've had a few, probably jumping clean round in the teams event at the World Championships and helping the team to finish 7th, which qualified them for London. It's always nice to hear the national anthem played. I've won some Grand Prix in Europe and finished 7th and 10th in the World Cup final, which is a yearly ranking. That's a blast because we jump outdoors and we jump in 30, 40 degrees heat. These guys jump all year round and indoors and in the indoor circuit, and we take a horse from Christmas time across to Europe where it's -10, -15 and expect them to perform like they do. So there's a lot of management. I get a lot of satisfaction out of just getting in and out of the ring with a horse that's improved, and very proud of them. So for me, it's more about the competition than the winnings and the placings.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I know you've had a lot of proud moments and wins and great times. What about your biggest challenge? What's that been?
Oh, I think it's still coming. I've managed to, I'm 57 now, so I've managed to sell a lot of horses that have been to Olympic Games, and I've been reserve a few times, and to me that's not being an Olympic team, being a reserve rider. So to me it's about actually riding at the Games. So I've purchased 4 horses, and I'm setting them, Gabby and I both setting our sights for the Japan Olympics in Bajikawa. So that's my main aim and focus now, is that I can afford to, keep the horses that I couldn't afford to keep before. I've had to sell them to make a living, and I've reinvested, and I have a very nice 7-year-old called Levelinsky. He's won the Mini Prix championships at the show jumping championships last weekend, and he's doing more than he should be doing. Sorry, he's 6 years old.
Okay.
He's 6 years old, winning the 145s, and then I've got another horse called Ditto, which I bought from an auction in the Verband in Germany, and he's jumping World Cups, and also got a very nice mare that Gabby rides called Chantilly. She's jumping in the 145 Grand Prix as well. So, and then we've also got Cassiago, and Gabby's got a mare called Flair that's 7 years old, and she's winning the Mini Prix, and also just came back from New Zealand at the Equitana, and she finished second in both Grand Prix. So we take young horses forward, and then we also step them back a little bit in the classes, and we find now that the quality of horses, and because they're so well bred and they're bred for this sport and they have instinct already in them, like a cattle dog or a sheep dog has instinct to look at a cow or chase a sheep, we're finding that it's a lot easier to start training these horses for a 4-year plan. Each year they progress, and each year they get better and stronger, and mentally they become Grand Prix horses. So we quite often test the 7-year-olds in World Cups and Grand Prix, and then we step them back down into 135, 140 classes, and by the time they're 8 years old, they're seasoned, ready for World Cups and ready to go to the Olympics. But unfortunately, they've changed the age now, where Crystalline went to the World Cup final as an 8-year-old. Now they've changed the rules since then, and the horses have to be 9-year-old and have to be 9-year-old for the Olympics as well. So it's very important for us to purchase horses that by the time the Japan Olympic comes along, my 6-year-olds are 9 and my 7-year-olds are 10. So it's important to be able to think 4 years ahead, buy 4 years ahead, and train 4 years ahead. So that's what I've learnt from the sport, and the horses that are qualified and ready to go to Olympic Games or a World Championships or a World Cup final, and they come out of that show, they're worth a lot more money than they went into it. So to me, it's about producing horses rather than what I can take out of them. It's what I can put into them. And I'm very happy with the quality of horses that I've been working with over the last 3 or 4 years. I've bought well, reinvested, and we have probably, I would say for sure, the best team in Australia at the moment, and probably the best 4 young horses in the world.
Chuggy, you've got a lot of horses. There's still got to be a turnover though. You must have horses for sale all the time, do you?
I don't normally sell local horses in the marketplace. I used to deal a lot of horses to Japan and Korea and work on the Asian markets when I was younger, but these horses that we're producing now are for international market.
Okay.
But by saying that, there's a lot of young riders out there now that are purchasing horses through other trainers and dealers in Australia for $150,000 to $200,000. So it's very difficult when you ask me the question, what's the advice I give the young riders and the junior riders, and they've really got to be able to learn their craft, but also have a background in a business or a job that can support their dream. So the local market is a good market. It's a very strong market, but the horses I purchase from overseas are, in the view of the quality that the money that I've spent on to buy the horses for the investment, are horses that I think that are going to be Olympic Games horses or World Championships, and those horses don't get sold here to the local market. So it's a very strong market, and you can deal in. There's some very good warm bloods getting bred now for jumping in Australia, but because a lot of the brood mares are foundation mares of being thoroughbreds or dressage bred warm blood mares that you don't actually get the top 1% out of that type of breeding. I've been breeding for 30 years and I've never bred a 5-star horse.
Okay.
So I rely on purchasing from Europe the best 4-year-olds I can buy. But in saying that, we're now producing embryo foals out of our Grand Prix mares now.
Yep.
And Crystaline's produced 3 or 4 here. And we've also purchased her mother's in Germany now and Bavaria, and her mother's been bred back to Crystaline's father, and we've been lucky enough to purchase both of those. So we also have 4 and 5 foals in Germany and Europe, as well as the 9 foals coming this year. So probably in 4 years' time, I won't have to go back to Europe and look for horses as investment horses. And by then, the marketplace here, you know, as I said, the price of young rider and junior horses now is very strong, and you know, there's a lot of business. There's a lot of new families that aren't so old now that it's not old money, it's new money coming into the sport. So they're very happy to support their kids, and also it's very strong that they've got the inter-school competition. So, you know, that's where the grassroots start from, and that's where people get excited and they get hooked on the sport. And it's a very good sport. It's a lot easier than eventing on the horses. It's a lot easier keeping the horses sound. You can start every weekend, you can compete every weekend, and your horses don't need big rest and holidays like they would if they're eventing horses. So as much as I enjoyed the eventing game, but I never put any money back in my pocket. It cost me a lot of money. And
yes.
So I learned where the market is, and the market's in Europe and America.
Yep.
So you know, we tap into that market now, and it means that we fly horses to Australia, and then we work on them for 3 and 4 years, and then we put them back on the plane and we fly them back to the marketplace. And the World Cup finals is a very good class for us in Australia because it's a 5-star class. We get to go there because we win the league here. We get to go and jump against the best riders and horse combinations of the year. And if you happen to finish in the top 10, well, the type of money that you can get for your horse, if you're willing to sell it, is enough to set you up and buy a property and put you forward for another 3 or 4 years. And then you just got to make sure you reinvest with the right horses.
Yep.
And Gabby and I, that's our future. That's what we do. And every horse, every start, every competition, every month is a training program to produce that horse for a 4-year plan, which is the Tokyo Olympics.
Okay. Wait, can you hear anything? No? That's because we're waiting for someone with a good quality horse product to be advertised here. If that's you, then contact us, horsechats@horsechats.com, and we'll send you the details. Thanks. I'm going to go back because you said something about the grassroots riders, and I want you to put on your trainer's cap, because we've got a few listeners that are show jumping fans, and they might, you know, I'm sort of taking a bit of an example here. Sometimes we get a lot of riders that are riding, competing, they've come up a little bit. They're still fairly basic. They're still jumping a metre 10, but doing well. Then they start to come up a little higher, and, you know, the rails start falling down and they're not going as well. What sort of tips have you got for them? What sort of training for that type of rider? What should they be focused on?
Well, you've got to be focused on keeping your horse positive. You know, it would be the same as if my brother was Tiger Woods and he can make a living out of playing golf, and I can't play golf at all. So you've really got to work with what your horse has got to give you. You know, not every horse can jump 140, 150, 160. So, you know, if your horse is happy jumping around a metre and you find that every time you put him around a metre 15 or a metre 20, you have a lousy day, he's telling you that 2 things: he's either not capable and he's trying his hardest, and don't keep pushing him to a point where he starts stopping or not enjoying his day, or you need some help, get some lessons, take videos of yourself, watch videos of yourself. You know, it's very important to look and learn. You know, a lot of horses are in a level where they're suited, and a lot of horses can't get out of that level. It's the same as racing, the racing game. There's a lot of Group 3 horses and very few Group 1 horses.
Yep.
So it's basically you've got to recognise that your animal is giving you his best, the horse is giving you his best, and if every time you ask him for a bit more, he's telling you you're not ready or he's not ready, well, just stay in the class that you're in. And that's the beauty of height classes. Everybody can be competitive in the heights they're in.
Yep.
I learned that very early age. That's why I go to Europe and buy my horses and don't rely on trying to buy off the local market, because the local market is good enough to compete in Australia, but it's not good enough to produce horses for Olympic Games at the moment. It's going to take another 3 or 4 years. There's a lot of studs out there breeding with a lot of imported semen, a lot of frozen semen coming in from Europe, and we're getting a lot of competition mares and a lot of owners that are flushing embryos out of their competition horses, and I think in the next 5 years we might start producing a few 5-star horses, and that would be exciting because it would mean the money comes into Australia and stays in Australia, and means that I don't have to spend my money outside and buy horses from Europe, and it's very expensive to fly them here, and then you have to pay your tax in and out of the country, and you also have to pay your tax when you sell them. So it's just a big circle, and it's something that I have to try to think ahead. I'm getting closer to 60 than I am 50, so I have to try to think about my, somehow I can support myself as I get older. I tend to ride till I'm 70 plus, so I don't look to retire for the next 10 or 15 years, and I'm probably going to be riding these foals that are born now and last year out of all our embryos. We have foals by Big Star, we have foals by Emerald, Olympic Games gold medalist horses that win World Cup finals, and they're out of competition mares that are winning 145 with the future of being Olympic Games horse. So I think that I probably, by the time 10 years pass, the conversation we're having now, I'm probably not going to have to purchase horses from Europe. I'm going to be able to buy them and breed them here. So the sport looks very strong and very positive for a lot of riders in Australia. I think the next generation, the 13 to the 18 to the 19-year-old kids that are out there now, are going to have be able to purchase horses here of an enormous quality, but also the rest of the world is learning that a lot of good horses do come from Australian riders, and the world will start coming here and purchasing them as well.
If you're an equestrian coach or a horse riding instructor, or even if you aspire to be one, have a look at the free video series for horse riding instructors on the Horse Chats website. Go there now, have a look, horsechats.com. Normally I ask a question, what does your future hold? But I think you've been telling us, it certainly sounds exciting, and you're pretty excited about the future. Is there anything else that you haven't said that you're looking forward to?
Oh, no, I'm just looking forward to a good life. I've had a very good life up till now, and life's been learning every day, and horses are my sport and my future, so I take it very seriously, even though I seem pretty casual. I get to shows, and when I go to shows, it's business, and, I run into a lot of amateurs that are there for a great time, and I'm riding horses that are worth a lot of money in the practice area, so I take my sport very seriously, and I try to make sure that I get to a show and get home from a show and all the horses are very safe. And so some people think that I'm a little bit arrogant at the shows and a little bit too serious, but to me it's a business, always has been a business, and I think it's a breath of fresh air. I get to go out and work with lovely animals with great brains, and I don't have to go out the gate, and I don't have to chase lessons, and if it rains you don't get your lessons, and if every time I get a group of riders together and start training riders, I go to a World Cup final or a World Championships and you're away for a year, your clients move on, which is the name of the game. They go to other trainers. So I've learned that you can't pay your property off and you can't pay your bills. If you're going to compete in Europe, you're going to lose customers. So I've basically narrowed my business down to working for myself with Gabby, and I'm very lucky to have a partner that rides so well, and she supports me and she runs the business. So I'm very lucky, and I think the next 10 years is going to be better than the last 10 years. Brilliant.
Okay, look, can you sum up your philosophy into a lesson today?
Into a lesson today?
Well, you talked earlier about your favourite quote. Do you want to go over that again?
Yeah, I just keep it easy. George Morris taught me very early in life, when I was always trying to be very competitive and win a lot of classes, you can win the battle but you lose the war. So it took me a few years. He didn't explain it to me. He just told me about it. It took me a few years to work out what he was meaning. And, you got to realise you're working with animals, and you're working with a lot of blood in the animals, and there's a lot of circumstances. You've got to keep your emotions out of your riding. You've got to be able to be cool and calm, but in saying that, you've got to be switched on. You've got to be switched on ahead of what your animal's thinking, what your horse is thinking when it goes to a jump. So I never fail to prepare. I'm training all the time. I'm making sure my horses are overconfident, really confident. You need to have great jumps at home. You need to be able to trot over everything that you're going to canter over. If you can't trot over a Liverpool or a brick wall, or trot through a double, or trot over a brush, or you don't have your horse wanting to investigate. That's a big thing. The horses go every day to a show. They come back home positive. They're not meant to come home negative. So I keep the positive aspect happening all the time. So I'm probably the only one that trots in the practice area over an oxer and over a practice fence, and most people trot their cross rails, but, I take young horses to competitions, 4-year-old competitions, and I'll trot the first fence, and I'm not worried about what the judge thinks and what the score's going to be. I'm there to produce the horse and give the horse confidence. So if a horse doesn't have a lot of confidence at the canter, and you do your work at the trot and you make it very small fences, and it teaches you, as a rider, to have timing, and it also teaches the horses a depth to go to the fence. A lot of people try to jump off a long spot, and if you find that being a difficult exercise and the horse is always running and out of control after landing, well, use trotting lanes. Use a lot of, look up George Morris, School of Equitation. He has so many exercises in the book and so much knowledge there, and there's so much online now you can watch. Get someone to video you. When I teach students, I video on my phone and I show them. It's very important to, you see, and picture tells 1,000 words, so it's important.
Yep, great. All right, how can people contact you?
Oh, I'm on chuggyequestrian@gmail.com, or my phone number's readily available in all the advertising we do with Casiago, and I'm happy to coach. I'm happy to do clinics. Clinics are good for me because it can give me certain times of the month where I give my horses a break and I get to go away and teach. So I used to do a lot of clinics and a lot of coaching, but as I said, being away in Europe, a lot of people now, a lot of students now are 15, 13, 16-year-old. They actually don't know who I am. They're amazed that I still ride. So you got to rebirth yourself every now and then, and I suppose I'm a little bit restricted in that I'm not great on the internet. So I just rely on buying and selling. But if anyone's interested in having a clinic in Melbourne, Brisbane or Sydney or Adelaide, I'm available.
Okay.
I coach up to 30 students a day, but it just has to fit around my show season, so it's a little difficult for some people.
All right, those contact details will be on the Horse Chats page, which will be horsechats.com/Chris Chugg. Chris, it's been amazing talking to you today. I've really enjoyed it. I think the tip that you gave particularly, that I asked you about the riders, just videoing yourself, getting someone to help with the lessons, but also recognising when your horse is giving its best. I think that's been great for the listeners. It's also been good talking to you about, what you plan for the future, particularly the next 10 years. And I think everyone will just look forward to you getting better and better. Okay, thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you, and thanks for everyone listening. Have a good Christmas.
You too. Now, if you're still there, you probably know that I'm absolutely passionate about education within the horse industry. That's why I host this podcast. My other venture is Online Horse College. Have a look now at onlinehorsecollege.com and I'll see you over there.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.